Welcome to Fresh Start Podcast. I'm Dave Henning, and my guest today is Margie Warrell from Australia. You're a life coach and an author, best-selling author of 4 books, including this one. You got this. What a great title. I love that. And so thank you so much for being with me, Margie.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on.
So I've obviously, you've got a lot of background material for me to catch up on and get to know you better. So both my grandparents were farmers. In fact, one was a dairy farmer in upstate New York. So you grew up on a farm with 7 children, and you had probably lots of experiences. And so tell me a little bit about life on the farm before we dive in here.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, yes, I grew up on a small dairy farm in rural southeast Australia. My dad, milked cows for 50 years just to make ends meet, pay the bills and raise his 7 kids. And, when you're in the midst of growing up, you don't know anything different, right? And I always felt like I was missing out on the exciting life of kids in the city who got to go to the movies and got to go to roller skating rinks. And they got to go to pinball parlors. And I was stuck on this farm. But obviously now with a few decades behind me, I see it as an incredibly organic and pretty wholesome childhood. We rode horses and motorbikes. We made our own fun there. We grew our own veggies. We grew our own beef and meat. And so it was actually a very organic childhood. Not that my parents were, organically trying to be that way. It's just that we didn't have any money, and so that's all we could afford was to grow our own stuff. We never had fast food. We never went to a restaurant, not once. So that was my first 18 years, and life. My horizons didn't expand much beyond the back fence, David. And I knew there was a big wide world out there, but I had no real idea of what it was. And so when I left home at 18 to go to college, the first in my family to do that, in any extended family, first generation of college. Yeah, I guess I just had a spirit of adventure. Like, I just want to experience more of the world. So even just going to college in Melbourne was a big, bold thing. And then, of course, I've spent much of the last 25 years living and working around the world in multiple countries. And so, yes, my horizons have expanded a long way since those days of just getting up and riding my horse to our one-room schoolhouse.
Wow. Well, memories to be cherished for sure. And you've come a long way since then, obviously, and you've had some great experiences. I understand that you actually started your business with children. Your children were under the age of 5 years old. That is bold right there.
No, I have 4 children for those. But I moved to the United States in just after 9/11, early October 2001. And with 3 very young children, 3, 2, and 8 weeks old, and then had a 4th child. My husband and I call him our little Texas souvenir. And so, Matt's 17 now. But when he was 6 months old, so I had 4 kids, 5 and under. I started my business, which was at the time very much coaching. It was exclusively coaching at that point in time. But in order to go out and build a business, I realized I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone in America. I mean, I knew some women who lived in my neighborhood. I lived in Capel, just outside Dallas, Texas. But I didn't have an alumni from college. I didn't have any business network. And so in order to build my business, I realized I needed to get out there and people needed to kind of have a sense of who I was and what the value I could bring. And so I started going out and just speaking at every event you could think of. Anyone who was looking for a speaker for free, I would go and speak about, the things that I had a passion around, whether it was about how to communicate more effectively and, how to set boundaries and manage our time and our energy and how to have a better mindset, and didn't really have a clear focus on what I just wanted to help people live happier, more fulfilling, rewarding lives was sort of my primary sense of purpose and mission at that point. And then, of course, over the years, it's been 17 years now, over the years, I've been able to articulate what it is that I do better. And obviously, I've built up a large body of work around it that's very much, the thread is around helping people live and lead with greater courage and take bolder, braver actions. And so I do not as much coaching now and a lot more speaking, and now at far bigger events. And of course, I've written books and, interviewed world leaders and done a whole lot of very interesting things since that time.
And I noticed you've co-written a couple of books with some of my favorite authors, Stephen Covey and Jack Canfield and Ken Blanchard, and you got to hang out with Richard Branson, who I've always admired as just a go-getter kind of a guy who invented himself. So what was Richard like? Did he tease you much or what?
He was fabulous. He was just great. I really enjoyed his company. So I was invited with a group of thought leaders and entrepreneurs down to his island, Necker Island, in the British Virgin Islands, and about 5 years ago now, actually. Time's flown, but. And I went down there, and I write for Forbes, and I was invited to interview him. And on the first night, and he'd just flown in from the Congo that morning, where he'd been doing one of his projects with the Virgin Unite Foundation, his foundation, and they've got a lot of different objectives, and one of them is around environmental sustainability. And he straight away couldn't have been warmer, couldn't have been lovelier. And as I sat down with him that night to interview him, honestly, we had fun. He's playful. He's a truly people-focused person, and I thoroughly was very, very impressed by who he is as a human being. Yes, I mean, he's an entrepreneur, and we can talk about all of his successes and failures and all of his things he does well as an entrepreneur, but just as a human being, he's a high-caliber human being, and I really enjoyed my 4.5 days with him.
Isn't that great, though, to meet people like that? You've met many that, will just look you in the eye, listen, pay attention, and be interested in you rather than, as you say, just promoting themselves, which it sounds like something we all need to do, is to pay attention to each other.
Yeah, and I've had some really interesting experiences with that, because I have over the years through my work got to meet some pretty, high, sometimes famous people, big platforms, well-known. And I interviewed, for instance, Bill Marriott a few years ago. I mean, took his dad's, what was a root beer stand, and he's grown it into the world's largest hotel empire, which has obviously had an incredibly rough hit over this pandemic. But I went to Marriott headquarters and met Mr. Marriott, and he was just the most delightful gentleman, and just very much about how do we bring out the best in people. And yes, he's a businessman, and he's got to be a businessman, but again, a fine, high caliber human being. And I've had that experience multiple times with people who have become incredibly successful. And I have had the odd experience with people who I've been really disappointed by, very egotistical, very about themselves. I mean, I'm not a big somebody, and so if they sum you up, like, there's nothing I can get from you, and so dismiss, there's zero interest. But I tell you what, those people have often taken a big fall. I've seen a few take a big fall because, frankly, they really aren't people of integrity, and their lack of integrity and the ego that drives them is usually what trips them up as well. And so those people who really transcend that kind of ego, it's all about me and me looking good and aren't I amazing, but who really are people with a deep sense of purpose and mission, who aren't driven by ego, they are those who ultimately, I have found, achieve great success, but it's also sustained as well, because they really are driven by higher order intentions, not lower order ones.
Exactly. Yeah. Integrity is key. I'm glad you mentioned Bill Marriott. I was actually living in a little suburb of Boston, I jokingly say, called New Hampshire, living up on Lake Winnipesaukee, and Bill Marriott, one of the Marriott compounds, was right up the road from us, and his groundskeeper's daughter was our babysitter for our little girls when they were small, and Coretta Scott King lived up there writing her book years later as well. So it's a very interesting area, and I was kind of like yourself, just surprised that that a lot of people, when you talk to them personally, are quite down to earth, and that's very fulfilling and very appreciative of that. I try to be the same way in terms of relating to people, hearing what they're saying, and someone famous once said, I've quoted this way too many times: "Find a need and fill it, find a hurt and heal it." Yeah. And that's my passion as well. So, and as I think about the things you like to talk about and write about, which is courage and bravery. Of course, I automatically think of Mel Gibson and William Wallace in Braveheart. That feeling of bravery that some of it evokes. But you talk about in your book something very interesting. I think that relates to this whole subject is self-trust. In fact, that really is. Trusting yourself is what you say in your book here. You've got this, the life-changing power of trusting yourself. And all of us have a certain amount of, can I say this to say that we may have some baggage that we don't need to be carrying anymore, and that can kind of distract from our humble beginnings or my blue-collar roots from my family and things like that. But tell me about, what does that mean to you? What is self-trust, and how does that impact on how we relate and it's the world, really?
Well, I mean, I think it was Einstein that said, the most important decision we ever make is whether we're operating in a friendly or a hostile universe. And it might not be a conscious decision, but if we believe we're living in a friendly universe, then we believe that the greater forces at play, that the universe is conspiring for us. And it's not all bad luck. Life, our challenges aren't in our way, they're on our way. Life is happening for us, not to us. And so how this kind of comes back to so much of my work, and certainly my book, You've Got This, is often fear that we will not succeed, fear that we are unworthy, fear that we will fall down and be exposed as inadequate, fear that we're unlovable, fear that we'll fail, fear that all of these fears, and obviously there's some core fears, but they sit there and they leave us constantly needing to make up and compensate for them. So we either play it extra safe because we want to avoid situations where we could be exposed or found out as inadequate or be rejected, or we overcompensate and let me tell you how great I am. Let me prove how worthy I am. Let me show you all the great things I do. But either way, fear is running the show. And yet when we're able to operate from a place of deep innate sufficiency, of adequacy, that I know I am innately adequate regardless of what I do or don't achieve. I know I'm innately lovable whether or not you like me or not, or how many fans I have, or if some people don't like me. That fundamentally shifts how we show up in the world and how we engage with people. And so this construct of self-trust, and the flip side of it, self-doubt, is sort of the same as courage versus fear, faith versus fear. And so if we trust in ourselves that we have the innate capacity, we have everything it takes to meet the challenges that life brings our way, that in itself liberates us to go, well, what do I want to do with my one and only life? And if I come up against challenges, which we will come up against if we are living a meaningful life, because if you're living a meaningful life, you are going to pursue aspirations and ambitions that are bigger than you. You're going to go after things that you don't know that you're going to succeed at. You will take risks. You'll put yourself out. You'll write the book. You'll start the business. You'll grow the business. You'll leave the job, whatever. But if you are doing that, then there's going to be times you'll fall and you'll falter. And some people won't like you, and bad things happen. But we'll go, you know what? It's okay because I'll figure it out. And that's a very different place to live from when we buy into the little voices in our head that say, who are you to do that? You're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. See, told you you'd fail. See, that person rejected you. See, you're not good enough. We're living from this place of fear and doubt. And that actually keeps us from taking the very actions that would allow us to realize how little reason we had to be afraid. And so that self-doubt becomes self-reinforcing, because the more I don't do things, the more I go, see, I can't do it. Whereas if I think, you know what, I don't know how to write a best-selling book. I've got no idea. I mean, I went to a tiny one-room schoolhouse. Blah, blah, blah. But I'm gonna give myself permission to try and figure it out. I'm going to pursue what I feel, for me, a passion around. Then I wrote the book, and then I tried to figure it out, and I self-published the first one, and I went and gave free talks, and I didn't know, I made million mistakes. But along the way, I met people who were like, oh, you should connect with this person, and you should connect with that person. It was so much about the power of connection, and that passion is contagious. People are attracted to passionate, purpose-driven people. And then doors open, and synchronicities happen, and that Goethe poem that boldness has magic, genius, and power in it. And so I think when we trust in ourselves that whatever it is that tugs on us to do, because I think we're all here to do something in the world that no one else can. No one's walked your path and has your unique blend of personality, passion, experiences, hard-won wisdom, skills, opportunities, and no one has mine, and anyone listening, no one has what yours are. And so when we heed that kind of calling, that I just feel like we move in the direction of with the energy, and we trust in ourselves that whatever happens, we can handle it, and that we can rise and grow and thrive amidst the challenges. That allows us to make such a bigger impact in the world, but it also comes back to us and we go, see, I can do it. This little girl who grew up on a dairy farm and wasn't that well educated can interview these people, not that they were even on my radar to do that. It just, those opportunities literally landed in my lap, but they landed in my lap because I was actively out there in the world, just doing what I'm passionate about. And that's how, if you tried to make that happen, you probably couldn't. But if you kind of just go out there and give what you have to serve the world, to heal the pain, to fill the need, whatever that is, then opportunities and good luck happens to us.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. That is so amazing when we realize, my friend John Maxwell wrote that book, Failing Forward. Well,
yeah.
Some of my failing has not been too forward, but nevertheless, you had an association with NASA, and I'm not far from NASA over here at Moffett Field in Mountain View and in the valley here. And one of the truisms about that launch to the moon was the fact that they were off course most of the time, and the computers had to get them back on course. And I think that's the story of my life. It seems like we, as you're saying, we come from certain backgrounds. We have certain thoughts that they can either dominate our mind, or we can overcome them and like you say, believe in ourselves. And that's a challenge for some people, especially transitioning here into one of the things you wrote about in your Forbes article, 10 things to remember when you're going through tough times. And I guess it's fair to say that the entire world has been kind of broadsided, hit with a tough time that none of us were expecting. We didn't read it in Halley's Comet or in the stars, and it just occurred, and here we are. So we're all in this together in that respect. But in the midst of that, I'm so excited because this has been a time for you and I to slow down enough to have some big dreams, some big possibilities, to do some big thinking, and not get caught up in the what ifs, but what can I do now? So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the story of NASA, obviously, yes, I did a lot of work with them when I lived in the DC area at their headquarters there. And so much of our lives, we make plans that are linear. I will go to college, I will graduate, I will get this job, then this job, and then I will, earn this much, then buy a house, and then blah, blah, blah. And, our plans may be linear, but life is not. It is not linear at all. And I can assure you, and as I've shared in my new book, You've Got This, my plans over the last few years have just fallen completely away, and not, things have not worked out the way I had wanted it on a few fronts. And And I've just had to kind of just take a step back and go, okay, not how I wanted, this isn't where I want to be right now. But I know that there is opportunity for me to learn and grow here, and that I didn't ask, I didn't want, I'd rather have avoided, but I'm going to make sure I extract whatever learning there is from this. And I think we need to decouple the failure from our fear of failure. And we need to also recognize who we are as a person is not the circumstances of our lives. We are much bigger than the circumstances of our lives. And so I tried something, I failed. So I made a mistake. So I had a plan, it went pear-shaped. So I lost money. And a lot of people have lost money in the last few months. Either lost money they had or have failed. Certainly for me, a whole lot of income I thought was coming in has not come in, because I do a lot of keynote speaking and a lot of, facilitating big events and running sometimes weekend programs, and everything's been cancelled for now. But yeah, bam, it's like, oh, well, wasn't planning on that. So how can we, so much of, I think what we need to do is constantly step back and ask ourselves, what's the story I'm telling myself right now that's not serving me? Where is this story driving self-pity or blame, neither of which serve us? Where is it keeping me stressed and anxious and only focused on what can't be done, living in a mental wheelchair, versus what can be done? What can I do here with what I have? And there's always opportunities to do that. And I have to practice that a lot myself. And my kids are on another continent, 3 of them right now from me. And it's not how I want it to be. They're great kids, but it's what's happened with this pandemic. And I've just had to kind of go, all right, well, what's the opportunity here? The opportunity is, for us to build incredibly strong bonds using, thank goodness we have technology. The opportunity is for my kids to just discover in themselves resilience and self-reliance, that, like my 17-year-old, who's on the other side of the world from me, he is going to become a human being, a man he already is, a leader, beyond anything he might have if everything had been neat and orderly. It's been difficult. And so I think there is always opportunities for us, but we have to be so careful about where we're putting our focus and attention. And when we have those failures, and I've had business failures, I've invested money in things and look back and go, that didn't pay off, in hindsight, but we can't live in hindsight. And so we just have to take that learning and go, all right, how can I use that learning to create a better future, to move forward, as Henry Ford said, more intelligently. And much of our lives were a bit off course. And I think the key thing there is, David, that we don't get stuck with what's called sunk cost bias, continuing to invest in a losing proposition. That when we realize we're off course, we pivot, we adjust, we tweak, we go, okay, that's not working. And as Richard Branson said, actually, when I interviewed him, he said, I've failed lots of times. I just don't spend 5 years drawing out the failure. I go, okay, that's not working. Change it. Let's change our strategy. Let's drop that product line. But let's not just drag out the failure forever. And so we constantly need to be making course corrections in our lives.
That pivot, that's a great word. And one of the things that I've had to remind myself is when I go in the wrong direction, maybe I'm investing in the wrong place or something isn't working, I've had to, instead of saying, oh, I failed, I say, what did I learn from this? And I think you really just said that, actually. What did I actually learn from what I just went through, or what I did, and that word is pivot is a great word to think about.
Yeah.
If I may ask, your number one job is you're the mom of 4 kids, and you have had the great opportunity of taking them to some places around the world, and I noticed that you had been to to Nairobi, to the Kibera slum area, and I had no idea years ago that I would have the privilege of showing up and going to Kenya to work with our schools among the Maasai tribe, with our daughter and son-in-law here, and it's been quite an eye-opening experience, like you say, to not realize when you first started out that you're going to have all these amazing opportunities that just presented themselves to you. And then I understand, and I know this is a little bit sensitive, but you've had to be quarantine with the COVID situation that impacted your family. So how are you doing?
Oh, thank you for asking. And it's not it's not sensitive. My husband got COVID-19, and he was actually in the US visiting our kids. I have two children at college in New York, and he arrived back in Singapore, where I'm currently living, which is not part of the plan thing, but I won't go into all that. And within 24 hours of landing back, had a bit of a fever and a bit of a cough. And I was like, and this was in mid-March, is obviously this pandemic was really starting to gain momentum. And sure enough, he went off and got tested. And in Singapore, anyone who has this virus gets hospitalized. And then they're put into quarantine until they're testing negative for the virus, which actually took and tends to take about a month. And now they now know that if you have had the virus, you can still be testing positive even though you don't have it, because your lungs are like, there's cells that are being shed. So the testing to see whether you've got it 3 weeks after you were sick might show that you're testing positive. But he was stuck in there for a month, and he has made a full recovery. And but yeah, I was put into then 2 weeks of quarantine with my son Ben. And it was a bit stressful. It certainly was stressful when Andrew was sick in the beginning, because obviously we know this virus can be incredibly dangerous. But as it turned out for Andrew, he's a pretty fit guy and his immune system responded well. And frankly, we don't know if maybe I got it as well and was asymptomatic. I don't know, because I obviously I slept beside him in the height of his contagiousness before he got sick. So, could I have got it and I just did not have any symptoms at all? Maybe. But anyway, so yes, I'm doing well. And in Singapore, it has been in lockdown for 11 weeks. So I have not been outside much since, mid-March. I'm getting a haircut today, and I haven't had my hair cut for 4 months or coloured, so it's why you're seeing it pulled back like this. Yeah. So
you can't see my ponytail back here, but
yeah. I've had better hair days. Let's just say that.
We're in Santa Clara County, which was hit big time here in our area. So we totally get that, but we're surviving and thriving as well. Not only surviving but thriving, and we're really living a life of faith in these times. So I'm speaking with Margie Warrell, who is a great life coach and best-selling author, and it is so exciting to be with you and have you on my podcast today. And I do need to ask you, how can I help you? What is your website? What would you like me to share with folks? And do you do some some online speaking, online courses nowadays?
Yeah. Yes, I have actually numerous online courses. And if people go to my website, margiewarrell.com, you can see my online courses. My Life Compass course is probably the premier flagship one for helping people get unstuck and on track to a life that lights them up. But I'm also running a You've Got This workshop on the 30th of June. I'm not sure when this is going to be published, but on the 30th of June, I'm running a 3-hour deep dive program to help people really take the learning from this last few months and the challenges it's held, and really look at how can we live the rest of 2020 and far beyond it with a greater sense of purpose, passion, and courage. So, and I'll be drawing on the insights from You've Got This. And so, yes, I encourage anyone, pop over to my website, connect with me on social media, and please do check out my book, You've Got This, and my own Live Brave podcast. So, yeah.
Look, that looks like the real book. How did I do that? It's magic. I always wanted to be a magician. Margie, it's been a pleasure to have you, and we will promote the heck out of your program coming up at the end of this month, June. We are in June. Oh my goodness! A 30-hour workshop on You've Got This. Yeah,
3 hours, not 30.
Oh, 3 hours. Whoa, 30 hours. Whoa, wait. That'd be like a 30-hour quarantine with you.
Yeah, no. I think that would probably, people would not like me if it's into 30 hours. So I think.
Let me cross out that 0 right here. Margie, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and we just want to make sure that we are helping you as well in any way that we can, and reaching out to our community and sharing this good news of a great life still to come. So,
well, thank
so
you.
much.
God bless you, and to everyone listening, I just encourage you to back yourself more and trust that you've got this, even when you don't know what's coming. Because I really believe that when we connect to that quiet, still place within ourselves, it's sort of beyond all of the stormy waters around us. It allows us to find courage and power and resiliency that we might not tap into otherwise.
Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it. Have a great week.
Thank you. Take care.